Thank you. Sorry to keep you waiting. Big, long day. And thank you for the media who've made the trip here today and to all those watching on the YouTube live feed. We've got here, obviously, the IAAF President, Sebastian Coe, the IAAF Vice President, Hamad Kalkabar Malboum. We've got the IAAF CEO, Olivier Jez, and the chair of the IAAF Russian Task Force, Rune Anderson. So I'm not going to hold you up anymore. I'm going to hand over to Seb to talk. Anyone on their mobile phones, please stop talking, please. Thank you.
Jackie, thank you very much, and let me again echo. We're sorry that we're holding this press conference so late, but we have unashamedly had a very full day. And in fact, they've been 4 or 5 very, very full days, because we have also had our commission meetings, our working group meetings, our workshops, and of course all the area presidents are with us. So we have been discussing the continental issues as well. We discussed and agreed a few things at Council today. I think we tend to feel last year was a foundation year, which, as you know, because you followed the events, was really about establishing a framework of strong, robust platforms upon which to build on the reforms which we passed here in December last year. And this year really is a year of transformation. We're moving forward with some very meaty pieces of work, some really key projects. And let me give you a couple of instances for that. The review of records that is currently being undertaken with European athletics, a review of our bidding processes, aligning our area constitutions to the reforms that we passed and were approved in December, a focus on sponsorship and commercial opportunities, looking at the format of the one-day meetings, which is one of our key products, alongside, of course, our championships. And, of course, linked into that closely is the coordination of the calendar, the competition schedule, and, of course, innovation. And that's a very good opportunity at the moment to talk about innovation, because we have the World Relay Championships coming up in just literally a few weeks' time. And as soon as our council work is done here, both Olivia and myself get on a flight to go to watch Nitro in Australia. And this is important. So it's innovation, it's one day, it is the calendar, it is certainly about our format and the alignment of our commercial and strategic ambitions. We also agreed that as from today, we will freeze all new transfers of allegiance in athletics. And the Council has set up a working group. It has a work in progress. Many of our area associations have already undertaken work in this area. And as a matter of urgency, we will agree a set of protocols and rules with the approval of the Council, and by no later than the end of this year. I'd like to say a few words about this and then pass to the IAAF Vice President and President of the African Area Association, my Vice President colleague, Hamad.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm in this room with Mr. Jackson Twe, the President of Athletics Kenya. And I'm happy for Africa to lead this work on behalf of IAAF. The present situation is wrong, from my opinion. What we have is a wholesale market for African talent open to the highest bidder. Our present rules are being manipulated to the detriment of athletics credibility. Lots of the individual athletes concerned, many of whom are transferred at a young age, are not understanding that they are forfeiting their nationality. This must end, and a new way forward found which respects the athletes' rights and the sport dignity. Because some of them, they are running for countries, but they are not citizens of those countries. They have just owning a permit. And then at the end of the competition, they are not considered as citizens of that country. They don't have any future. So we are totally against this process.
Hamad, thank you. Let me dive into a little more of that detail. I think it has become abundantly clear, and it is certainly the widely held view of the athletes, that with regular multiple transfers of allegiance, especially from Africa, that the present rules are simply no longer fit for purpose. Athletics, which at its highest level of competition is a championship sport, it has to be based on national teams and is particularly vulnerable in that aspect. And the observation that Hamad made just a few moments ago, the rules as they're currently structured do not present and provide protections necessary for individual athletes. They are involved and open to abuse. I have spoken to many member federations who regularly receive a list of athletes that are out there and available for trade. This cannot be a sustainable system for us in international sport. So our issue is a very clear one. We are going to return to the Council with proposals that do meet the needs of the athletes, do meet the needs of our sport, and it is vitally important that we conclude with a system that is safe and secure, that promotes the interests of our sport, helps us globalize that sport, and maintains the values that attract young people and particularly our commercial partners and stakeholders. So I am delighted that Hamad and the African Area Association will help drive the work from the centre, pulling together best practice and understanding across the global family of athletics, and to return to the Council with a set of proposals that we think will in large part meet the challenges that we have confronted in the last few years. Let me turn now to our presentations throughout the course of the day, because we had a presentation from Morocco and Ukraine on the work that they are currently undertaking to deliver better anti-doping structures in their countries. Both countries, alongside Kenya, Ethiopia, and Belarus, remain on the care list, but the Council was encouraged by the work they've all been doing and the recognition for the need for safe and secure systems. We have a timeline. We have clear programs in place, and the monitoring will need to be maintained. But it is absolutely essential that we understand where those challenges lie and how we can best remedy those vulnerabilities and fragilities. We also had an update on the latest recruitment process and structures for the Integrity Unit, which is on track to be established in April. And last but by no means least, we had an update from Rune Andersen, the independent chair of the Russian task force. So let me immediately hand over to him. Rune, thank you.
Thank you, Seb. I'll give you a brief update on what has happened since we met last, at least most of you, at the beginning of December last year, and some background to what has happened. So we met with we reported to the IAAF Council today on the developments in Russia since our last meeting. Some of these developments were negative, unhelpful comments by the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, Mutko, evidence that another provisionally suspended coach is still training athletes, limited testing at national level, and certain problems with the testing that is taking place. But others were positive, including productive meetings in Moscow last month with the RUSAF President Dmitry Slyatkin, who continues to impress the task force with his hard work and professionalism, with Colonel Serdev of the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation, who assured the task force that the committee will cooperate with the French criminal authorities investigating the doping conspiracy between former IAAF and IAAF officials, and that the committee will conduct a full investigation into the McLaren findings, and those who did wrong will be brought to justice. We met with Andrei Dmitriev, the 1,500-meter runner, who with his colleagues is trying to win support among Russian athletes for clean sport. With RUSADA representative, who expressed confidence that RUSADA, which is the Russian anti-doping agency, will be able to meet WADA's condition for partial reinstatement in May 2017 and full reinstatement in November 2017. And finally, with the new Minister of Sport, Mr. Pavel Kolobyakov, who was clear that the ministry will provide every support to RUSADA, but will not interfere in its operations. So based on the above, the task force considers it will be able to recommend conditional reinstatement of RUSAF to IAAF membership if and when the following milestones are met. The outstanding verification criteria must have been satisfied and must continue to be satisfied moving forward. The testing of Russian athletes must take place without any further adverse incidents or difficulties. RUSAF must explain how, moving forward, it will be able to enforce all suspensions imposed on athletes and athlete support personnel under its jurisdiction in an effective and timely fashion. That there must be an appropriate official response to the McLaren reports, specifically addressing Professor McLaren's finding that officials from the Ministry of Sport, the FSB, and the Center for Sports Preparations were involved in the doping scheme, either by convincingly rebutting those findings or else by acknowledging and properly addressing them. That RUSAF's leading officials, athletes, and coaches must lend their support to the clean sport movement championed by Andrei Dmitriev and his colleagues. And that RUSADA must meet all of the WADA's condition for reinstatement as a truly autonomous, independent, and properly resourced national anti-doping organization. These conditions will have to be met before reinstatement. So pending RUSAF's reinstatement to membership, the task force notes that Russian athletes are able to apply to participate in international competitions as neutral athletes if they can meet certain specified criteria. The task force also recommended that the Council grants RUSAF's request that Russian youth athletes under 15s be permitted to participate in international competitions without the need for individual applications. In addition, the Doping Review Board in IAAF will consider any applications by junior athletes under 18 for permission to compete as neutral athletes in the IAAF World Under 18 Championships in Nairobi in July 2017. Finally, based on the task force report and recommendations, the Council decided not to reinstate RUSAF to membership yet, but to accept the roadmap identified by the task force, specifying the remaining milestones that RUSAF must reach in order to be reinstated. And finally, in the meantime, to give under 15 athletes blanket permission to compete in international events as neutral athletes, and with under 18s and other athletes being permitted to apply on an individual basis for such permission. Thank you, Seb.
Thank you, and thank you, Rune. I'm very grateful, and I can confirm that the Council unanimously adopted the recommendations in the task force report. Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, so Q&A, usual format. If you could just let us know your name and which organisation you're from. Thank you. No question. Oh. Yep.
Hi, Nick Ballard from Inside the Games. Rooney, you spoke about wanting some admission of responsibility from the Russians if they can't convincingly rebut the evidence against them. Does that have to come from the Sports Ministry and the FSB itself? You specifically mentioned the Deputy Prime Minister of Italy, Mukko. Does he have to apologise or admit the wrongdoing for Russia to be readmitted? And secondly, a question for Hamad. Can you confirm you're interested in running for the presidency of the Association of National Olympic Committees of Africa? There's rumours that you're interested. Thank you.
So, Rune, do you want to go first?
The question of acknowledging that there is a problem in Russia, the question of apologies is one that we have raised every time we have been to Moscow, and that is now a number of times. We have raised that with the ministry, we have raised that with RUSAF and other sports authorities, and in general, I wouldn't pinpoint to any specific person that needs to say apologies or in other ways, apologizing for what has happened. But we expect that the Russian community is acknowledging that they have a problem, because only when you're acknowledging you have a problem, then you can do something about it.
Hamad?
Yes, I have a very strong intention to stand for the election of the presidency of the ANOCA next May. But I will make my decision in due time within a few weeks. I'm committed to serve that organization.
Okay, I think that's a yes. Richard, and then we'll come back to you.
Richard Conway, BBC. Lord Cole, listening to Mr. Anderson there, do you believe, on hearing that there's been a change of culture within Russian authorities now towards their isolation from world athletics? Do you think that now has changed? And in terms of giving an official response to the McLaren report, how likely do you think that would be? Do you think the Russians are now prepared to acknowledge fully their responsibility for being isolated from the sport?
I'm not sure whether I would quite define it that way, but there's no doubt at all, having obviously for very good reason been following this very closely, but recognizing the independent nature of the task force, that on each and every occasion the task force has reported back to the council, progress has been made. And I think it's really worth the reprise here that the criteria were very clear. They were unambiguous. They were not suffused in politics. They were about remedying a situation that had brought the Russian Federation in breach of our own ethical codes and certainly within the wider framework too. So every waking hours that these guys are focused on this, they are trying, you know, meter by meter to get to a situation where we get Russian athletes back from clean, secure systems into international competition. Yes, I think there have been some subtle shifts, and I think there is a recognition that this is clearly has been a very disfiguring episode in Russian sport. And I think I'm encouraged by the conversations that I have with the task force, the nature of the report of that task force, but I'm not clear about the amount of work that there still remains to be done. And I think the really important concept here, and it's often overlooked, is our ability to separate clean athletes and the potential for clean athletes from a tainted system, and that will take time. And as you know, these are not simply Russian challenges. We have had, you know, anti-doping problems in sport for as long as I have been, you know, an active competitor and in administration. But I did think last year it was important that we began to draw a line in the sand on behalf of our sport.
Okay. Rooney, did you want to add to that?
I agree with Seb on this intervention here, and I think it's quite clear on what I mentioned in my report, which shows clearly that in the leadership in RUSAF, in track and field in Russia, there has been a shift in culture. To make that go down in that huge country is a huge undertaking, and it's difficult to measure for us. We see the documentary where it shows that coaches are still breaching of bans that they have received. But I could say that, and I can say that the top leadership, which has been changed entirely in RUSAF, has changed. And we experience, we think, an honest will to do something. Whether that goes for the political leadership in the country, I don't know. I'm not that certain.
Sure. Yeah.
Just that question about change of culture. You say there's been breaches. I'm talking about the grassroots level here. Do you see evidence of that cultural change within the Russian athletics?
We met with, as I mentioned, Mr. Dmitriev, who was in the documentary from the ARD, the Sunday before we had meetings 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago in Moscow. And he talked about bringing athletes together in the message of a clean sport. We thought that was pretty powerful because he had started this from scratch from his blog, which is what young people do these days. Whether it will lead to something, we don't know, but it was encouraging to listening to him that he managed to stand up and to come forward with this message. And he mentioned that he had a number of athletes on his side moving in that direction. So we will just have to monitor that situation and see how it goes.
Thank you, Jim. Geraint.
Hi, Geraint Hughes from Sky Sports. Question for you, Seb, which maybe Runa may want to follow up on as well. When the suspension's continuing, when is the last date? When is the last chance? With London now exactly 6 months away until the World Championships begin, when is the cut-off? When do you have to make a decision whether Russian athletes will compete as a Russian nation, or is it most likely, Seb, that we're going to have a number of athletes, because there is a pathway that they can apply to compete as neutral athletes. At London 2017, there will be Russian athletes, many of them competing under a neutral flag.
I'm going to ask Runa to deal specifically with the process points, and then I will come back to the central question.
The roadmap that I outlined here now and to the Council earlier on clearly states that there will be no reinstatement until RUSADA is functioning. And there was one milestone in May where they will start conducting testing, and there will be, presumably, if everything goes in accordance with the plan, be a full reinstatement by November 2017, which means that Russia as a nation, or RUSAF, is not recommended by us to be reinstated until that time. Now, the participation from Russian athletes is a different issue, because since June of last year, there has been a possibility for athletes to apply for eligibility to participate in international competitions. That still stands, and Russian athletes will be able to apply for such participation.
Can I just be clear? No reinstatement before a full reinstatement in November or May?
November.
So Russia, your recommendation is that Russia as a nation should not compete at under 27.
Well, to lift the suspension from Russia being, or RUSAF being reinstated into IAAF, our recommendation is if RUSADA is not reinstated until November, that will be the date.
Seb.
Yes, I'm not going to add anything more to that particular point, but just to re-emphasize the broader point that we have always been at pains to provide an opportunity for athletes that can demonstrate that they are from a clean system, that we are comfortable that the registered testing pool is a valid one, and that they are under international supervision, and that they are in systems that we are comfortable are safe and secure, but most importantly are not going to jeopardize the opportunities and the chances of the clean athletes that will be competing alongside them. That it's been very important, as I said, that we have done everything we could to separate the regime from the individual athlete, and we've always felt that that was a proportionate response. We did so in and around the maintenance of the suspension of RUSAF at our Vienna meeting, and the ability for athletes to be, if they could prove that they were clean, to have a position or a commitment. But I think Runa's made it very clear that with the maintenance of the suspension of RUSAF, that could only take place on a neutral basis.
Just so everyone's got the same information, we've had 35 applications from Russian athletes to date to compete internationally as neutral athletes. So we'll go through our process, which I think you all know or can find on the website. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Clémentine Blondet, l'équipe. Is it possible that some of these neutral athletes from Russia could compete at the European Indoor Championships, or is that just too early?
It is possible. If they meet the criteria that the Doping Review Board of IAAF has set, then that is possible.
And there are already probably two that can. So as you know, Stepanova and Klishina are both able to compete. So yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And again, sorry to keep you waiting. Thank you for coming.